Prego. Davis. Eklund. Haroldson. Harshman.
Excused.
Heiner. Henderson. Hornick. Jennings. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Locke.
Excused.
Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas.
Excused.
Nemec. Northrup.
Excused.
Oakley.
Excused.
Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Pendergraft. Penn. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Sherwood. Singh. Slagle. Smith. Stith. Storer.
Excused.
Strock.
Excused.
Stivar. Tarver. Trujillo. Walters. Ward. Washut. Western. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Zwanitzer Dan.
Excused.
Zwanitzer Dave. Speaker Summers.
Here.
Nicholas. 53 present, 9 excused.
Thank you. So obviously we have once again, we have one committee out, and so we'll wait for those good folks. We won't wait for those good folks, actually. And we'll just keep moving along. So the prayer of the day today is by Reverend Melinda Bobo of St. Andrews in the Pine Episcopal Church in Pinedale. And Reverend, I want to take this opportunity because she's from my hometown. Reverend Bobo has worked on substance abuse and suicide prevention committees, efforts for affordable housing, and has helped fund mental health services for children in the K-12 setting, and has done really a remarkable job in our community. And so for the prayer of the day, please stand.
God of grace and God of glory, we thank you for the beauty of this day, the warmth of your sun, the brightness of your light. We ask that you shine that light within us, that you warm our spirits. Remind us of who we are, who you have made us to be. You have created us to be your children, to walk in your ways, to do your will, to be a blessing to one another, to love and care for everyone on this earth, to be good stewards of all of your creation. And for this, and by this, we are humbled, because we know that we are not worthy. We know that we are broken, that we are flawed. But we also know that you will always stand with us as we seek to do your will, that you hold us in the hollow of your hand and you will never let us fall. Lord God, pour out your blessing this morning upon this body, your body, that they may be faithful people, stewards of your abundance, gifts to your creation, and loving neighbors to all of those people in Wyoming, in this United States, and throughout the world. Help all of us to always hold first and foremost love, because this is your guiding principle. And from that love flows justice, and from God's justice flows mercy and compassion. We remember the least of your children, and the greatest of your children, knowing that you hold them all to be the same, and that we, your faithful sons and daughters, will do the same. We pray for your grace. We revel in your love, and we extend that love to one another and to the whole world on this day in the work to be done in this place. And we offer up everything that we are, everything that we have, and everything that we do to your glory and praise. Lord our God, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Reverend Bobo. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The House will please come to order. So for all of those people that were out in committee or not here, the chief clerk, just as you came in or as you're sitting down, she's punching you into the roll, so you will be present and not excused. We're at that order of business of introduction, reading, and reference of bills. Oh, we're not at that order of business. Journal Committee report.
Your Journal Committee reports that the Journal of January 11th, 2023 has been read and recommends that it be approved. Representatives Ward and Chestick.
Thank you. So actually, if I just follow my own script that I wrote myself, it would help. And so Representative Nicholas or Representative Larson, you know, I don't want you to take long, but everybody today received a little green sheet and a little yellow sheet. And I was wondering if one of you would take a privilege of the floor and just briefly remind the members and the new members what these are and what that means when we get a Craig report that was issued yesterday. So Vice Chairman Larson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Privilege of the floor.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the House. We have our consensus revenue estimating group. This is a group of our LSO staff and the executive staff and folks who try to estimate the revenues that we'll be having based on our minerals, our severance tax, and other royalties. And you'll remember that in October we kind of get an annual one, and then we have an update in January, again in July, and again in October. And so this is just a little bit of an update. And the reason they do that periodically is things change in our world, and it's noted in here with the price of investments and stocks and some commodity changes. It tweaks how we estimate what our revenues will be in the future. And so the takeaway from today was really that the funds that we use for general funds and for schools doesn't change at all. But we've seen some declines in some of our investment revenues, but we've seen some increases in some of our mineral severances. There's some unique things for those of us in an energy state, showing the differential between natural gas this year going to California, averaging for the last 365 days over $10 an MCF. Unbelievable. But the gas down here at the Cheyenne hub going east is about $4. And there was a time when that was just reversed, but never that much of a gap between the two prices. Just depends on what weather's doing around the world. Our investment strategy, those of you that have your own stocks have seen some challenges over the last year. We see that with the investment in our permanent funds as well. That's reflected in here. I would just suggest to you to read through it, make a list of the questions, because it's a great document for you to become familiar with, and your questions are going to be a little bit different than mine. We're happy to help you walk through it, as is our LSO staff with fiscal. Also, the yellow sheet kind of we call it the goldenrod, kind of helps you have an understanding of where we are in the LSRA and the common school account and in our general fund account. This too is one that I hope that you'll kind of learn to get familiar with. And again, how you view this and your questions is, I don't want to take time and try to go through that all today. If it's completely foreign to you, okay, been there, then take some time with Don Richards, with members of the Appropriations Committee or Revenue Committee. Chairman Harshman probably knows this better than anybody in the House. Get familiar with this. This is a great resource. Both of these are great resources for your constituents at home when they're saying, what's going on? How is this working? And you can say, well, we're able to base our budget because our Craig forecast is doing this, and we have concerns here. We're very fortunate in other areas. So the takeaway from what I'm telling you, Mr. Speaker, today, or that I would suggest, is to take the time, and we don't expect it to, it will take some time for, if you have any Larson genes in, it'll take a little longer for you to digest this and perhaps the rest of you, but it's worth becoming familiar with, and would just really admonish you to read and study this a little bit. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So, Vice Chairman Larson, just one thing on the goldenrod, just explain to the group, and that is the columns H, J, and L. Just in broad terms, what that means, prior to, and then the Gov's rec, and then obviously with the October Craig, January Craig, and that'll help them, I think, understand the what's below as well.
Well, and Mr. Speaker, thank you, because this is a great example. I'm just sitting here making the assumption that you've already digested that, and so we're just at different levels. And when we get out ahead of you too far, just saying, hey, what does this mean? And so, column H, as you look at the goldenrod, is the October Craig status. So this is where we were at in October. When the governor is then, we base our budget on these projections. And so then the governor comes in and he's got his projections for his budget based on the October Craig. And then this in column L is in for Lloyd, is the column adjusted with the estimates and the impact that we're seeing as of January on what we saw in October.
Thank you, Vice
Thank
Chair
you.
Larson. Appreciate that. So we are at that order of business now of introduction, reading, and reference of bills. The first bill for our consideration is House Bill 12.
House Bill 12, sponsored by Judiciary.
First reading of the bill.
Presumptive child support amounts, updated tables.
House Bill number 12 is referred to Committee number 1, Judiciary. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 14.
House Bill 14, sponsored by Judiciary.
First reading of the bill.
Civil case filing fees, amendments.
House Bill number 14 is referred to Committee number 1, Judiciary. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 83.
House Bill 83, sponsored by Representative Larson Lloyd.
First reading of the bill.
Tribal agreements to hunt and fish.
House Bill number 83 is referred to Committee number 2, Appropriations. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 2.
House Bill 2, sponsored by Representative Heiner.
First reading of the bill.
Town officers salary waiver.
House Bill number 2 is referred to Committee number 2, Appropriations. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 71.
House Bill 71, sponsored by Representative Brown.
First reading of the bill.
Sales tax holiday, back to school.
House Bill 71 is referred to Committee number 3, Revenue. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 72.
House Bill 72, sponsored by Representative Brown.
First reading of the bill.
Sales tax revisions.
House Bill 72 is referred to Committee number 3, Revenue. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 30.
House Bill 30, sponsored by Education.
First reading of the bill.
Wyoming's Tomorrow Scholarship Program amendments.
House Bill number 30 is referred to Committee number 4, Education. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 109.
House Bill 109, sponsored by Representative Summers.
First reading of the bill.
Wyoming Works for Tomorrow.
House Bill number 109 is referred to Committee number 4, Education. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 22.
House Bill 22, sponsored by Agriculture.
First reading of the bill.
State land lease deficiencies cure process.
House Bill number 22 is referred to Committee number 5, Agriculture. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 93.
House Bill 93, sponsored by Water.
First reading of the bill.
Omnibus Water Bill Construction.
House Bill 93 is referred to Committee number 5, Agriculture. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 75.
House Bill 75, sponsored by Representative Banks.
First reading of the bill.
Painted fence posts, no trespassing.
House Bill number 75 is referred to Committee number 6, Travel. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 104.
House Bill 104, sponsored by Representative Haroldson.
First reading of the bill.
Hunting of predatory animals, amendments.
House Bill 104 is referred to Committee number 6, Travel. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 49.
House Bill 49, sponsored by corporations.
First reading of the bill.
Municipal nonpartisan rank choice elections.
House Bill 49 is referred to Committee number 7, Corporations. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 55.
House Bill 55, sponsored by corporations.
First reading of the bill.
Election ballot order and party affiliation.
House Bill number 55 is referred to Committee number 7, Corporations. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 44.
House Bill 44, sponsored by transportation.
First reading of the bill.
Road and bridge construction, alternative contracting.
House Bill number 44 is referred to Committee number 8, Transportation. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 45.
House Bill 45, sponsored by transportation.
First reading of the bill.
Peace officer retirement and rehiring.
House Bill 45 is referred to Committee number 8, Transportation. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 40.
House Bill 40, sponsored by transportation.
First reading of the bill.
Airport districts.
House Bill 40 is referred to Committee number 9, Minerals. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 69.
House Bill 69, sponsored by Representative Larson.
First reading of the bill.
Coal-fired facilities, closures, litigation, funding amendments.
House Bill number 69 is referred to Committee number 9, Minerals. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 19.
House Bill 19, sponsored by Tribal.
First reading of the bill.
State Indian Child Welfare Act Task Force.
House Bill 19 is referred to Committee number 10, Labor. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 82.
House Bill 82, sponsored by Representative Larson Lloyd.
First reading of the bill.
Defendant mental illness examinations amendments.
House Bill number 82 is referred to Committee number 10, Labor. All right. So let's see, reports from standing committees.
House Bill 5, sponsored by corporations. Voter registry list, voter ID, and absentee ballots. An act relating to elections. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 7, corporations, elections, and political subdivisions, to whom is referred House Bill 5, voter registry list, voter ID, and absentee ballots. Respectfully report same back to the House with a recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes. Representatives Chadwick, Haroldson, Harshman, Knapp, Newsom, Olson, Ottman, Wiley, Yin. Representative Olson, Chairman. House Bill 28, sponsored by Education, Community College Capital Construction, an act relating to the duties of the Wyoming Community College Commission. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 4, Education, to whom is referred House Bill 28, Community College Capital Construction. Respectfully report same back to the House with a recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes. Representatives Allred, Andrew, Berger, Brown, Houston, Lawley, Northrup, Obermuller, Provenza. Representative Northrup, Chairman. House Bill 29, sponsored by Education, Community College Funding Distance Education Credit Hours, an act relating to community college funding. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 4, Education, to whom is referred House Bill 29, Community College Funding Distance Education Credit Hours. Respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes. Representatives Allred, Andrew, Berger, Brown, Houston, Lawley, Northrup, Obermuller, Provenza. Representative Northrup, Chairman. House Bill 50, sponsored by Minerals, Solid Waste Cease and Transfer Program Funding. An act relating to the prioritization of municipal solid waste facilities cease and transfer projects. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 9, Minerals, Business, and Economic Development, to whom is referred House Bill 50, Solid Waste Cease and Transfer Program Funding, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes. Representatives Banks, Burkhart, Junior, Conrad, Heiner, Knapp, Larson, Lawley, Tarver, Western. Representative Burkhart, Chairman. House Bill 61, sponsored by Minerals, source material associated with mining agreement, an act relating to the environmental quality. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 9, Minerals, Business, and Economic Development, to whom is referred House Bill 61, source material associated with mining agreement. Respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes. Representatives Banks, Burkhart, Conrad, Heiner, Knapp, Larson, Lawley, Tarver, Western. Representative Burkhart, Chairman.
All right. Just kind of one note on bills going out to the Revenue Committee, to Committee number 3. I'm kind of, one of the residential property tax bills will go out tomorrow likely. It's a committee bill. And then sometime next week, I will release like a whole bunch of those residential property tax bills. So if you've got one that's still in the hopper, I might want to know about it just so I coordinate a little bit. And I try to get, sometimes I try to, at least I'm going to try to get a lot of like-minded bills and committees at the same time so the chairman can kind of pick through those as he needs to see how the committee should handle all of those. So thanks for that. And Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker,
Please.
I need to re-refer bills. I think this is the point at which we do that.
That is correct. Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to re-refer, excuse me, House Bill 50, cease and transfer, and House Bill 61, source material agreement state, to committee number 2 appropriations, as they both have appropriations in them.
It is so ordered.
Okay. And Mr. Speaker, may I have a brief, very brief privilege?
Please.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you've seen floating around a lime-colored or lemon-colored sheet. That is the sheet that lists the general files bills for the day that we'll take up. So they're usually over here by the mailboxes. Get in the habit of picking one up every morning so you know what bills we're going to discuss on Committee of the Whole. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. So the yellow sheets, they started yesterday. There was hardly nothing on it, but there were yellow sheets today that have a couple bills on it. And they'll be outside that door in a stack. So when you want to grab your yellow sheet, you may. And Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole to consider bills number HB 009 and HB 13.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Representative Yin. Minority Floor Leader Yin.
Committee of the Whole will come to order. So before we get started, generally, just to give people some tips, as you heard, the Majority Floor Leader listed 2 bills that will be on Committee of the Whole today. I suggest when we have lots of bills, he'll give a couple. Those that will be our current order. What I would do is I would look up those bills, check to see if there are any amendments on it. If you like amendments on paper, that's when you should print it out so you'll have it in front of you when we start discussing those Committee of the Whole bills. So The first bill for our consideration is House Bill 9. The reading clerk will read the bill. And there are amendments. Thank you.
House Bill 9, sponsored by Judiciary. Juvenile Courts, Concurrent Jurisdiction, Clarification, an act relating to juveniles. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 1, Judiciary, to whom is referred House Bill 9, Juvenile Courts, Concurrent Jurisdiction, Clarification, respectfully report same back to the House with a recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Chestick, Crago, Haroldson, Jennings, Nymek, Oakley, Provenza, Rodriguez-Williams, Washit. Representative Washit, Chairman.
You have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure? Chairman Washit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 9 do pass, and I further move the adoption of the Standing Committee amendments, and I turn over an explanation of the bill and the amendment to Representative Oakley.
Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I bring to you House Bill 9. It's a fairly simple bill. What it is regards juvenile courts and whether and when they have concurrent jurisdiction with the criminal courts. So this came to the Judiciary Committee after a review of Supreme Court cases. Sometimes we do that. This one specifically is it was when the Wyoming Supreme Court had to interpret a statute because they found ambiguity. So this is to clarify one of those in regards to this jurisdiction with juvenile courts. So juvenile courts have concurrent jurisdiction with the criminal courts. And in the case at bar, the defendant was 17 when he committed an offense, but he wasn't charged until he was 18. So in the original case, the district court found that the juvenile court lacked jurisdiction since the defendant was 18 at the time he was charged. So the Supreme Court looked at it and said, no, that's wrong. It is about when the defendant committed the offense. So they said there was, that it was, ambiguous. It was ambiguous, but they found that there was this concurrent jurisdiction with the juvenile court. So basically, we're trying to clarify that in statute. So if you look at basically the entire bill, page 2, lines 4 through 6, say an adult is alleged to have committed a criminal offense or to have violated a municipal ordinance while the adult was a minor. So now to go to the amendment, what we passed is to actually significantly narrow what that adult means. So the amendment is an adult who has not reached the age, who is under the age of 21. So that narrows it to this 18, 19, and 20-year-old adult. And I think it's a very important amendment, and specifically in the case, the Supreme Court said, we're not talking about cases where the offender is charged and is over 21. So this is a way of addressing that. The Supreme Court didn't in the case because they address narrow issues. But I think it's important to, and it's because in practice, if an offender is charged over the age of 21, there is literally nothing that a juvenile court could do. When we focus on rehabilitation or punishment or any of those things, with juveniles, you're not supposed to focus on punishment, rehabilitation, but they aren't allowed. They couldn't go to the boys' school or the girls' school. They couldn't go on probation. So it makes it sort of superfluous, and I don't think that that's what we would want to create. So I think this narrows it to exactly what we want, what we're looking at in that 18, 19, and 20-year-old offender. And I was also going to say, I think to further that, cases that are charged when somebody's over 21, but it happened when they were under 18, almost exclusively are going to be very serious offenses. That's the reason that you would be looking at this. And so to use an example of, let's say there was a child victim that was, had a sex offense perpetrated on them. They don't reveal or they don't know for 10 years. But it's something that's still worth it for the criminal justice system to go back and address, because this could be a very serious offense for our society. So that's what you're looking at. And so it's important to be in the right court, to have the right tools. Even in that case, I don't want to get into the weeds, but what would happen is that they would be charged as an adult anyway, and then a defense attorney could say, I want a transfer hearing, which would just end up creating this needless process, because in the end, since there is nothing that you could do with an offender over the age of 21, the transfer hearing would be one. So it would create this just needless step. So I think it's important to narrow this adult, but an adult that under the age of 21, and that's the amendment to the bill.
Thank you, Representative. So for all the new members, right now, this is our time for unlimited debate. So just as a reminder, this is the time, if you don't understand the amendment or the bill, ask all the questions you need to, because second and third reading, you only get 2 chances at the mic each for each amendment. So right now we are on the amendment, so please speak on the amendment, but please do not hesitate to come to the mic and ask questions. Speaker Pro Temp Stiff.
Mr. Chairman.
Speaker Pro Temp Stiff.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I have a question for the representative from District 55. I think I understood the explanation, but to take the example of a 16-year-old who commits a very serious offense, if that 16-year-old is prosecuted immediately, then that person may get sent to the boys' school or the girls' school until they're age 21. If we have no statute of limitations for crimes in Wyoming, let's imagine it's a very serious offense. It's committed when the person is 16. They're prosecuted when they're 25. Would they then be facing potentially, say, 10 years prison? So would there be a differential treatment then, depending upon when the prosecutor chooses to bring the charge?
Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, there could, in the end, be differential treatment, and that might sound fundamentally unfair, but there isn't. There's a lot of reasons for delays when cases are brought. Usually, I mean, obviously, just a complete lack of knowing that offense occurred, and so by definition, it's not going to be similar treatment because of the realities of life. But, and of course, a lot of these very serious crimes, they're probably going to be held as an adult anyway. And then you would do this transfer hearing with these factors. So with the very serious offenses, they very, very well could have similar treatment. But is it possible? Yes. But I don't think it's still important that we do this, because I don't think that the answer is, since if there was a 16-year-old that was held for a crime and possibly got, more lenient treatment, that therefore we're going to hamstring what we can do with serious crimes that we discover later. Because if somebody is over 21, there's literally nothing that the juvenile court system can do with them. So in essence, if it went through juvenile court, it would be meaningless. But I can also tell you what would happen then is that you'd win the transfer hearing, so that it would still be held to that same, they're going to face the same punishment. So at best, what you're looking at is creating this transfer hearing, which is just a needless hearing, because you're not going to win a transfer hearing with the 7 factors of a transfer hearing about how the juvenile court system would be more fair when the juvenile court system is unavailable to them. So that's going to be where they get anyway. It just doesn't create that hole in our law that creates this needless superfluous hearing, I would say.
Representative Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question, and I agree with everything the former representative said. My question is, with this standing committee amendment change, does it affect the juvenile record? So in cases now, do you get charged in juvenile court when you're that juvenile? In some cases, your record can be expunged or sealed or any number of processes. It would be my understanding from the interim that even if you were 25, you were accused and convicted of that crime, it could still be held there in juvenile, even though there's no processes. But my question is now on those record keeping expungement statutes, with this change, do you still get that same protection, or is there going to be a difference if you're over 21?
Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in these cases, regardless of what we do here, if the juvenile is tried as an adult, that's when I talk about this transfer hearing, so it's assumed that a case, that if you're under 18, that there's this concurrent jurisdiction, but it's actually up to, on these serious offenses, it's up to the district attorney to choose where they're actually going to even originally charge them. So in the case of serious offenses, they're going to be held as an adult anyway. But so that's your distinction, is because so when those juveniles, let's say, and I've had this, a 17-year-old, sex offender perpetrator held as an adult, those records aren't going to have those protections anyway. And so as far as confidentiality of them. But yes, so this would mean when it's in the criminal courts, there's not that juvenile court sort of confidentiality and protection, yes. But again, I would argue that if you're talking about these serious type of cases, which is what you'd be looking at here, the result will be the same.
Chairman Washut.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to emphasize that what this bill accomplishes is already the law in the state of Wyoming. Presently, though, it exists in the case law of Wyoming as determined by the Wyoming Supreme Court. What we're doing with this bill is bringing it into the statutory law, codifying that ruling of the Supreme Court. With the amendment, we narrow it to be a little more precise, that we're only talking about those cases where someone who's 18 to 21 at the time they're charged with a crime that they committed when they were still a juvenile will at least begin in juvenile court. The juvenile court will have concurrent jurisdiction over that case. It may not stay there. The juvenile court might move it to the district court, or it may be retained at the discretion of the judge. So what we're doing here is already the law. We're just putting it into the green books.
Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just real quick, in committee, I wanted to kind of give you a rundown. I voted no on the amendment. There was just some ambiguity, and we weren't able to hear much testimony from groups because it was an amendment that we did in committee. I think that there's merit to a lot of what the good representative has said. However, I think that just given that juvenile justice, we have created the Juvenile Justice Act so that we are considering the state of mind of an offender at the time that they committed the act. If we then change that with a cutoff of the age that you are once you are then prosecuted, we're no longer necessarily considering your state of mind, your culpability at the time of that act. So that I just want to give you my my take on this, but vote your conscience. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I understand what we're trying to do, but my question goes to the plain language of the text, and that's the word adult. I don't get it when it says an adult who is under 21. I think that's confusing. If you could help me understand why current law would say that. I mean, just as the previous good representative mentioned, would juvenile or offender be maybe a more appropriate word? Thank you.
Chairman Washit.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Chairman, in Wyoming, you turn an adult when you turn 18, right? You become an adult. The juvenile court, by our existing statutes, has jurisdiction for individuals up until their age 21. And we do this so that when a 17-year-old commits some serious offense, the juvenile court can deal with that individual for more than a few months before they turn 18, okay? So we have adults who are still restricted in many ways. They can't do everything that people can do when they're over 21. They can't buy alcohol, they can't buy handguns, all sorts of things, right? So you're still an adult. But under our Juvenile Court Act, the juvenile court has authority over those individuals until age 21. And that's what we're trying to address.
Representative Hornock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question, and that is, if this is already case law, by passing this legislation, the courts are already operating this way. By passing this legislation, are we just muddying the waters for the court system that's practicing a certain way already?
So members, I was told that for those new folks and those that are watching online, if you are not able to find out where the amendments are, you go to the list of bills under 2023 legislation on the WyoLeg website. You go to the bill number, there's an amendments tab. It has all the amendments, and we're currently on Standing Committee Amendment number 1. Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a couple things to address. I'll start backwards to the last question or comment. And it's a good question. But no, it doesn't muddy the waters, because specifically, it's kind of what I talked about at the beginning. So the Supreme Court was looking at how a district court interpreted the Juvenile Justice Act. And they said, this is the way it is. The Supreme Court reviews it and said, no, we found it just the opposite. And said that we think this statute is ambiguous, but so what we're going to interpret is that the Juvenile Justice Act means it this way. But clearly, when you've got the Supreme Court and the district court finding different things, and the Supreme Court saying it's, we thought it was ambiguous, but we took all this stuff in para materia and put it together, and we think it means this, you can just have one clean sentence that says this is what our law is in Wyoming. So we're actually specifically trying to unmuddy the waters by succinctly saying what the Supreme Court found. So there's that. So in response to that, and this is true, that the idea behind having juvenile courts is to focus on rehabilitation, to focus on, to recognize that they have an unformed, sort of unfinished brain. All of these things are true, absolutely discussed in juvenile law, but that doesn't change the fact that if we're looking at a case like this and somebody's 27 years old and being charged, that there's nothing that the juvenile courts would do, so it's not going to go through the juvenile courts. So we can philosophize, but in the end, that's got nothing to do with reality or practice. This gets us as close to narrowing exactly what is going to happen and what happens in our courts currently, and just makes it clear. And so to finish that, then going to the question about the adult. So adult is defined in our statutes as somebody who's reached the age of 21. So then, of course, that means 18 through 100 or whatever, obviously. So, but again, in this case, the Supreme Court said, but we haven't talked about if somebody's over 21. Like, we're not touching that issue. So that says to me, we could be right back here when we create another, ambiguity. So So in that time, there's still concurrent jurisdiction with the juvenile courts for somebody, because 21 is also a cutoff where you can't be in the juvenile courts, because we've got, like, there's federal law that no juvenile can, there's a sight and sound separation is what it's called. So if somebody's over 21, they can't even be around juveniles according to federal law. So there's just this differentiation where 18, 19, 20-year-olds can still be, can kind of receive this maybe this treatment from the juvenile courts with a focus on rehabilitation. It doesn't really exist after 21. This keeps it as clean and narrow as we can, and I think it's the appropriate amendment, and I think it's the right thing to do as far as passing the statute. So with that, I ask for your aye vote on the amendment, and I vote on the bill.
Chairman Washit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With regards to the muddying of the water, think about when you want to know what is the law in the state of Wyoming with regards to off-road vehicles. Where do you go to find that information? You look up the Wyoming statutes that pertain to off-road vehicles. No one goes and starts to find all the case law pertaining to off-road vehicles in Wyoming. And that's why we want to move this judicial decision and codify it into the green books, so that the vast majority of people, when they want to know what is the law in Wyoming with regards to concurrent jurisdiction of juveniles, they go to the green book. And that's where they will find their answer if we pass this bill and it becomes law. So I encourage you for an aye vote. Thank you.
Question having been called, all those in favor of Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to House Bill 9, say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 has been adopted. We are back on the bill. Question having been called on House Bill 9, all those in favor of Chairman Washit's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill number 9 do pass. Please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. House Bill 9 has passed Committee of the Whole. Congratulations, body. Did your first bill. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 13, thank you. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 13, sponsored by Judiciary, Office of Guardian Ad Litem, Program References. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 1 Judiciary, to whom is referred House Bill 13, Office of Guardian Ad Litem, Program References, respectfully report same back to the House with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Chestick, Crago, Haroldson, Jennings, Nemec, Oakley, Provenza, Rodriguez-Williams, Washit. Representative Washit, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Washit?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 13 do pass. And with that, I'll present the bill.
Please, Mr. Chairman.
Members, this is a fairly simple bill. In fact, it's a very simple bill. A couple years ago, we moved the guardian ad litem function out of the public defender's office into a standalone operation because there was an inherent conflict of interest between being a guardian ad litem and having it reside within the hierarchy of the public defender's office. So you might be asking, what exactly is a guardian ad litem? A guardian ad litem is an attorney who's appointed by the court to represent the interests of a child in some matter before the court. And the interests of that child might be different than the interests of the parents, or it might be different than the interests of some other party in the litigation. So the court appoints a lawyer to represent that child's interests in those proceedings. All this bill does is it goes through our statutes and brings the language into consistency. So what we have this function of the guardian ad litem program, and we go through the statute and we take out the word program and change it to office. We make these references throughout this bill so that we are consistent throughout the green books, wherever it speaks about the guardian ad litem. It doesn't say program in one place and office in the next. We simply say the guardian ad litem office, and we're consistent about that throughout the statutes. That's all we're doing here is catching up the language to keep up with where we are. So please vote aye.
Question having been called, all those in favor of Chairman Washett's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill number 13 do pass, please say aye. Those opposed, no. House Bill 13 has passed committee of the whole. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Chairman, we have one more bill we're going to consider before we rise and report, House Bill number 28.
Members, the next bill for our consideration is House Bill 28. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 28, sponsored by Education, Community College Capital Construction, an act relating to the duties of the Wyoming Community College Commission. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 4, Education, to whom is referred House Bill 28, Community College Capital Construction, respectfully reports same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Allred, Andrew, Berger, Brown, Houston, Lawley, Northrup, Obermueller, Provenza. Representative Northrup, Chairman.
It also appears that we have amendments. Vice Chair Obermueller?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman.
Point of order.
My apologies. Follow the script. It's always follow the script. We have a script, and I should run through it. You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Representative Berger?
Mr. Chair, you had it right the first time, I think.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Vice Chair Obermueller?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Bill number 28 do pass. And further, I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 20, that the Standing Committee Amendment number 1 also do pass. And for the explanation of the bill and the amendment, I turn this over to the good representative from District 49. Thank you.
Thank you. And
Thank you.
I apologize. With 3 bills, you thought it'd be not that hard to screw up, but it is why we give each other grace. Representative Berger.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pleasure of the floor.
Please, Representative Berger.
All right. So this bill came at the request of the Wyoming Community College Commission during the joint interim session during 2022. So they came and requested, they want to rise the authorization limit from community college seeking approval from 100,000 to 500,000. Now it's going, 500,000 would address both the lapse of time since the last change in 2008, as well as the anticipated construction inflation. Now this isn't new money, it's money that's already there. Okay, it's just it's like for instance, a facility manager wants to ask for more money, and because of inflation costs, Instead of going to Community College Commission to fix the foyer in the front, that's going to cost between probably like $400,000, let's say. Instead of going to the Community College Commission for permission, they can go ahead and capping that at 500,000. Questions?
No questions? Okay.
Also another part in this, we also, I guess we have the amendments, but the other amendment, we want the effective date to move quicker immediately after the session.
Thank you, Representative Berger. Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This appears to me that we are going to have less oversight. So I'm just wondering, is there an opportunity, are we just taking away oversight in this situation? And I'm concerned about that as we lift this dollar amount. Thank you.
Representative Berger.
Yes, we're taking, the oversight, but capping that to $500,000.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To answer that question a little more directly, what we're really trying to do is just keep up with inflationary adjustments, right? So the last time that this particular piece of legislation was looked at was 15 years ago, and the cap was at $100,000. And so when we had that $100,000, what $100,000 bought 15 years ago certainly doesn't buy today. And so in the process of trying to figure out what we're going to actually do with this, we said, first, during the interim committee, we heard this and we said, let's take it to 250. Well, the discussion during the interim committee was to actually put this at 500,000. It's not a reduction of oversight necessarily, but what it's doing is that it's allowing these community colleges, instead of having to go through every single time that they have a small project that, a couple of years ago would have been $100,000 or less, is now $280,000. Instead of having to go back to the commission every single time for this, we're just allowing these colleges to have the authority to go and do these projects without having to go back to the commission every single time. So.
Representative Hornock.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So I'm in construction, and just to let you know, I'm not sure about the amendment, but it does seem like, to a certain extent, sometimes we don't give, and just for your benefit, sometimes we don't give the oversight over construction projects to the maintenance personnel or the personnel on the campus that necessarily needs that oversight. And sometimes it helps for those guys just to be able to go get something done. However, I will say that $250,000 gets you a lot of construction, and $500,000 gets you a ton of construction, or it should. I know that market prices are getting inflated quite a bit, but just weigh that option as you vote for this. I'm not sure that I'm necessarily for the amendment, but it does sound like this is a decent bill. Thanks.
Representative Larson Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Folks, I thought that the 250,000 was probably acceptable in my opinion, as we've gone through a lot of capital construction projects we do every year. And we just see a lot of things that can go south, and a lot of things in the overall accountability for state funds in a construction project. And we've really tried to be more involved as a legislature to make sure, because we appropriate these funds, and we make sure that they're transparent and they're taken care of appropriately. I don't argue that the Community College Commission has the best intent, but I think that the $500,000 is too high, and I would encourage you to defeat that amendment. I think the 250,000 is reasonable. We can probably do that, and if we need to change that in 10 years, we'll change it in 10 years. That's, I'm dead and gone, and you guys, these young guys are here to carry on. You'll remember this conversation. You'll fix that. But there's a lot of potential for perhaps some use of state funds that we would perhaps question if our agencies aren't involved and we're not involved. So I'd encourage a no vote on that amendment.
Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I was actually on the Education Committee, I was there for the discussion, and it was kind of a heartburn that when we would move from 100,000 to a 500% increase in the ability to be able to make a purchase without oversight. And that was the discussion in the committee, was that we felt like a reasonable compromise was 250,000. I mean, and I appreciate the statement of my good representative. You can buy a lot of stuff with $250,000 even right now in the construction business. So I would stand against this amendment and move to go back to the previous amount. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Obermueller.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Part of the thinking here was that when you look at the history of how this number has been adjusted, it seems like with these kind of numbers, we revisit these numbers like every 10 or 15 years. So the first time that this one was looked at was in the 90s, and the last time was 2008. Now we're 15 years downstream. So project these numbers out another 10 years, 15 years, and the next legislature that looks at this in 2030 something, we'll be looking at a $250,000 number. So that was part of the thinking here, was just the reality of what the next 10 to 15 years looks like. So on and in favor of the amendment. Thank you.
Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the amendment, and at this time I'd like to divide the amendment, Mr. Chairman, and I divide it between lines 15 and 16. And I'll explain once you make the ruling, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Walters, so your division is 15 to 20 and 1 to 14, is that correct?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
That chair rules that's divisible. Which division would you like to take first?
We'll take division number 1, which is lines 1 through 15.
Okay, so division number 1, everybody, is 1 through 15. And then division number 2 is lines 15 through 20. And we are on division 1, please, Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we've heard the arguments raising from 250 to from 100,000 to 250 probably makes sense. Going on up to 500,000 is probably getting quite a bit out ahead of ourselves. And I'd remind the body that the state does pay for the major maintenance on all of the community college facilities through a formula not discussed here. And so having a little bit more control, making sure that everyone is aware of what these projects might look like. If it's an internal project, it may not necessarily change, but if it's an external project, a new vestibule on the outside of a building, then that's new square footage that will go into the formula the state would then pay for. So I think having it, leaving it at that $250,000 threshold for right now is good. It gives us room to move it up in a few years as we see fit. So again, on and against amendment, division number 1 of this amendment.
Representative Haroldson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if we take just a real quick snapshot of the building industry, wood was the first thing that skyrocketed after we got the disruption in our economy, and we've seen now wood begin to normalize. Now it's steel, rubber products, and concrete, and they're going to normalize. So I believe that we will see those building prices come back, probably not to pre-COVID numbers, but they're going to become way more affordable, and it's going to happen soon. And so I believe that 250 is definitely very much adequate, and so would ask that we would not open this up to 500.
Chairman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So vote your conscience on this truly, body. What I would ultimately say at the end of the day here is what the good vice chair had already mentioned as well, is it's been 15 years once that we looked at this statute, and it's probably going to be another 15 years before we look at it again. So the inflationary adjustment is not necessarily for this time frame. It's what we're going to see in another 15 years before we open up the statute again. That's really what we're talking about here, is we have a very long time that we actually go in and look at these. The other thing that was mentioned is that we have the major maintenance issues. Well, this isn't resolving major maintenance. This has nothing to do with major maintenance. This is new buildings, this is land acquisition, and this is construction projects that has nothing to do with major maintenance. However, what this does do is if we raise it up to that 500,000, is it's likely going to be a situation where the major maintenance on these actually gets rolled into and we have a little bit more oversight. But the last thing that I would say is just because we're raising this threshold does not mean whatsoever that we're getting rid of oversight of this. It still is going to be reviewed by the commission. It's just that it does not have to be sent to the commission for a full hearing every time that they want to do a construction project over $250,000. I would say vote your conscience on this. I see the old bear from the Fremont County here coming after me, but I would say, you know, at 250, I think we're all ready to roll with it, but vote your conscience.
Representative Larson Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. He'll think bear. So I think the piece of the conversation that I'd like to remove is this, somehow we're not going to revisit this again for 10 years. Whose fault's that? That's ours, or it's the commission's. If they think if they need to do it again next year, let's do it next year. But the fact that it hasn't been reviewed for 10 years or 50 years or a millennium is our fault or the commission's fault. There's nothing statutorily that says we can't review it next year. So, you know, I think if we find that I think we've heard enough evidence to suggest that maybe the $500,000's excessive, but there's still this argument out there to say, but there's this excessive time before we'll ever come back and revisit this again, and that just, I don't think that holds water in the argument, and I'd like to push back on that.
Representative Banks.
As one of the ones that could still potentially be around here when the good representative from Lander's gone, I could say,
Miss Representative Banks, please keep it to the bill. Thank you.
I could say that, as he mentioned, we could revisit this in another 10 years. I think 500,000 is a bit excessive at this point, but giving them the leeway of $250,000 is adequate, and so I would vote against the amendment. Thank you.
Question having been called. All those in favor of Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 28? Sorry. All those in favor of Division 1 of Standing Committee Amendment number 1, please say aye. Those opposed, no. Division 1 having been defeated, we are now on Division 2. Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Division 2, again, members, is line 16 through 20, and this is the effective date, and making it effective immediately, I think, makes sense. Let the commission get started on these projects or reviewing these projects. So I would encourage an aye vote on Division number 2. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, or Chair.
Question having been called. All those in favor of Division number 2 on Standing Committee Amendment number 1, please say aye. Opposed, no. Standing Committee Amendment 1, Division number 2 has been adopted. We are back on the bill. Division having been called, give me a second. Given that division's being called, all those in favor of Division number 2, please stand. All those opposed, please stand. Less than 51, division number 2 has passed. We're back on the bill. Question been called on the bill. All those in favor of Vice Chair Obermuller's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill number 28 do pass, please say aye. Those opposed, no. House Bill 28 has passed the committee of the whole. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Chairman, I move the Committee of the Whole rise and report.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The motion carries.
See, I've got to find my script. Thank you. The reading clerk will read the Committee of the Whole report. Oh,
Mr. Speaker, your Committee of the Whole, having had under consideration bills on general file, begs leave to report as follows. House Bill 9, do pass amended. House Bill 13, do pass. House Bill 28, do pass amended. Representative Yin, Chairman.
I move the adoption of the Committee of the Whole report.
you have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. Motion carries. Representative Yan. Representative Larson.
Mr. Speaker, privilege of the floor, if I may, please.
Please.
So, members of the House, earlier, before we debated bills, I talked to you a little bit about the Craig. There's some information that I take your pen out and write it on your palm of your hand or on your leg or something here, because it's something that, as you hear the fluctuation of prices, that will be really important for you to understand and important for your constituents to understand, and we refer to it all the time, so that in the course of a year, if the price of natural gas, and I just went and confirmed these with Mr. Richards to get updated versions, but if the price of natural gas changes up or down $1, that represents $120 million of revenue to the state, okay? So $1 natural gas equals $120 million, okay? Then if the price of oil changes up or down at $10, that represents $100 million in revenue. If the price per ton of coal changes $1, that represents $29 million in revenue. Or if the volume of coal increases or decreases over the course of a year by 10 million tons, that impacts general revenue by $16 million. 1 penny in sales tax represents 175 million back to the states and cities and towns. So when we talk about this fluctuation, and I talked about how over in the western part of the state, you've seen $10 gas versus $4 gas, you can see that the impact on that can represent, well over $500 million in the course of a year. Likewise, if that drops precipitously, then also. So when we talk about the Craig, and we talk about revenue back to the state, we talk a lot about this. And so if you'll just kind of keep that, it's a handy tidbit to have and take back home as you visit with your people on revenue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So, Mr. Majority Floor Leader, I think we'll need a motion for recess for noon. 2.
Mr. Speaker,
Please.
I move the House stands in recess until 2 p.m.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Committee reports. Announcements. Thank you. Chairman Newsom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, will meet at noon, since we have time for lunch. In room 5, we'll be discussing House Bill 48, Active Transportation and Recreation Grant Program, and House Bill 52, the Reviser's Bill.
Chairman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Likewise, your committee number 8 will be meeting at noon, so grab yourself some lunch, and we'll see you in room number 3 downstairs to discuss House Bill 36, Space Force Amendments, and House Bill 39, verifying the veteran designation on Wyoming driver's license.
Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 3, Revenue, will continue its meeting from this morning on adjournment in meeting room number 3, and we are working on and further consideration of House Bill 65-988, suicide hotline funding. Mr. Speaker, I would say also that at about, we're coming back at 2, so at about 1:25-ish, I'm going to meet any interested folks who would like to take a trip up to the Dome. I'm just feeling the urge, so if you want to join me. I'm at about 1:25, and we're going to take off at about 1:30. Thank you.
Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Not having any urges. Here, committee number 9, Minerals, will meet tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, for the consideration of 2 bills, House Bill 40, open banking, and House Bill 69, off-road vehicle operation. And we will actually meet at 7 o'clock for a half-hour informational meeting on the state of petroleum production in Wyoming.
Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Joint Appropriations Committee will meet at noon. First, it will be a presentation from the Governor's Office regarding the employee wage issues. And then we will continue our work from this morning and have a review of the capital construction bill. There won't be any action taken on the bill, but we'll have it explained to us and reviewed to it. And then tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, your Joint Appropriations Committee will begin what we call round robin. Round robin is where if you'll see that we've already have a draft of the supplemental budget that's out there. So this will be amendments that we'll be able to make in the round robin to the supplemental budget. And then once that's done, we'll see the final draft of it written up sometime next week. And then the following week on a Monday is when we'll present the supplemental budget to.
Thank you, Chairman Nicholas. Just a note on that. So the Appropriation Committee always tries to have a final action on the bill after you have the Craig report, right? And we just recently got the Craig report. And so that's, then they'll take a final action on that bill. Chairman Washut.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow morning at 7:30, your committee number 1, Judiciary, will be hosting a briefing in the historic Supreme Court chambers. You're all welcome to join. 7:30 tomorrow morning, historic Supreme Court chambers. We'll be hearing about fentanyl in Wyoming and our state crime lab dealing with that. And then at 8:30 tomorrow morning, the committee number 1 will meet in our normal meeting room number 1 at 8:30 to hear 1 bill, House Bill 11, State Park Rangers retirement. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, with that, we'll stand in recess until 2 p.m.